Imagine waking up on a beach with absolutely nothing. No phone, no supplies, no idea where you are, just sand, trees, and the sound of waves behind you. Movies make this look fun for some reason, like you build a cool hut in one afternoon and spiritually reconnect with nature before sunset. Real survival is much less inspiring. You're exhausted, constantly thirsty, covered in scratches, and every bad decision makes the next one easier. So today, we're counting down the most important things you actually need to do if you want to survive on a deserted island long enough to be rescued. And some of these become important way faster than most people realize. The human body can survive weeks without food. Water is the real problem, and dehydration is dangerous because it doesn't just make you thirsty. It slowly destroys your ability to think clearly. Your brain starts making terrible decisions while still sounding very confident about them, which is how people end up convincing themselves that drinking seawater is somehow a good emergency plan. It isn't. Seawater contains so much salt that your body actually loses more water trying to process it. So instead of solving dehydration, you speed it up dramatically. Your first priority should always be fresh water. Rainwater is the safest option, so collect it using anything you can find. Coconut shells, large leaves, plastic debris, even holes in rocks. Morning dew can help too. It's not much, but survival often becomes a game of collecting small advantages before they become big problems. And if you find a stream or pond, don't drink directly from it. Boil it first. Clear water has fooled humans for a very long time, which leads directly to the next problem. You now need fire. One of the worst things you can do is panic and start exploring without a plan. Unfortunately, that's exactly what most people would do. The moment humans panic, we suddenly feel the need to keep moving, even if we have absolutely no idea where we're going. People start hiking through jungle terrain, climbing rocks, or trying to circle the island immediately like they're unlocking a map in a video game. But every unnecessary step burns energy, water, and calories. Three things you suddenly cannot waste anymore. So instead, find high ground first. Not because it looks dramatic, but because information matters. From higher elevation, you can identify water sources, safer areas, dangerous terrain, and possible rescue visibility. Then establish one permanent base location. That becomes your anchor point. Your fire stays there. Your shelter stays there. Your supplies stay there. Without a fixed base, you're not surviving. You're just wandering with confidence. Most people think fire is mainly for cooking. Honestly, cooking is not even the biggest priority at first. Fire sterilizes water, provides warmth, scares away animals, and helps rescuers find you. It becomes one of the most valuable things on the entire island. And if you still have a lighter somehow, congratulations. You are currently the richest person alive. Because making fire without modern tools is exhausting. You need dry material, proper airflow, patience, and enough mental stability to keep trying after failing repeatedly. The bow drill method is one of the most realistic primitive options. A wooden spindle, a fireboard, and a curved branch used to create friction. Sounds simple in theory. In reality, this is usually the part where survival stops feeling fun. Your hands hurt, your shoulders burn, smoke appears for half a second and disappears again. And eventually, the island itself starts feeling sarcastic. But once you finally create that tiny glowing ember, everything changes, because now you can boil water, stay warm, create signals, cook food. At that point, fire stops feeling like a tool. It starts feeling like civilization itself. A deserted island looks beautiful right up until the sun goes down. Then the temperature drops, insects come out of nowhere, and every surface suddenly feels wet. Sleeping directly on the ground sounds manageable for about 10 minutes. After that, your body starts losing heat fast, and exhaustion gets worse by the hour. Most people imagine survival shelters as these huge movie-style structures that take all day to build. In reality, your first shelter should be ugly, fast, and functional. You are not building a beach house. You are building a barrier between yourself and a very uncomfortable night. The simplest setup is a lean-to shelter. Find 2 trees, secure a horizontal branch between them, then angle smaller branches downward to create a sloped roof. Cover that with palm leaves or anything wide enough to block wind and rain. It doesn't need to look impressive. It just needs to work. And one detail people constantly underestimate is the ground itself. Cold moisture rises upward through the dirt all night long. So even if the air feels warm, lying directly on the ground slowly drains heat from your body, like the island is charging you rent. Layer thick leaves underneath where you sleep. Seriously. Future, you will be unbelievably grateful for this decision. Also, build slightly inland, not directly beside the water, because the ocean has a very rude habit of moving closer while you sleep. A lot of people would learn that exactly one time. By this point, you've probably also noticed something else. Survival tasks never really end. The moment one problem gets solved, 3 more immediately introduce themselves, which is why your next priority matters so much. A lot of survivors make the same mistake. They assume rescue teams will automatically spot them eventually. That is an incredibly dangerous assumption. From the air, a human being is tiny. An island is huge. And unless you actively make yourself visible, planes can pass nearby without ever noticing you're there, which is psychologically horrifying once you think about it for more than 5 seconds. That's why signaling is not a side task. It becomes part of your daily routine. Fire helps, but not all fires work equally well. A normal campfire can blend surprisingly well into the environment, especially during daylight. What you actually want is thick white smoke. Wet leaves, damp grass, and fresh vegetation create smoke columns that stand out much better against the sky. At night, flames become more effective. A bright fire on a dark shoreline is difficult to miss, especially if it's placed in an open area near the beach. But honestly, reflected sunlight can be even stronger. A mirror, polished metal, glass, even a shiny phone screen, if you somehow still have one, all of these can send visible flashes across huge distances. Under the right conditions, reflected sunlight can be seen from kilometers away, which means one small object suddenly becomes more valuable than half the island. And then there's the classic SOS sign. Yes, it still works, because giant unnatural shapes immediately attract attention from above. Use rocks, logs, seaweed, anything that creates strong contrast against the sand. The letters need to be massive, though. This is not the time for neat handwriting. And while all of this is happening, another problem slowly starts creeping into your brain: hunger. Humans can survive surprisingly long without food. Water is still the bigger priority, but hunger creates a different problem: mental decline. Once your calorie levels drop far enough, motivation drops with them. Tasks feel heavier. Thinking becomes slower. Small problems feel enormous. Your brain basically enters low power mode while still expecting you to survive in the wilderness, which is inconvenient timing. The safest food sources are usually the simplest ones. Coconuts are excellent because they provide both hydration and calories. Fish, crabs, and shellfish near the shoreline are also solid options if cooked properly. And yes, catching fish with primitive tools is much harder than movies pretend it is. Fish in survival movies behave like unpaid actors, helping move the plot forward. Real fish immediately dedicate their entire existence to embarrassing you personally. That's why tide pools are useful. When the tide lowers, small sea creatures sometimes get trapped naturally, which means the ocean briefly starts cooperating with you for once. Plants are where things become dangerous fast. Tropical islands contain plenty of edible vegetation, along with plenty of plants fully capable of ruining your weak chemically. If you are not completely certain something is safe, don't gamble on it. And then there are insects. Nobody likes this section, but cooked insects are genuinely one of the best emergency protein sources available. Crickets, beetle larvae, grubs. They all contain nutrients your body desperately wants. Psychologically, though, your first bite feels like losing an argument with evolution. Still, hunger changes people quickly. One of the biggest survival mistakes is working hard all day because it feels productive. That mindset collapses fast on a tropical island. Every movement costs something: water, calories, strength, focus. And unlike normal life, you can't just refill those resources whenever you want. But once your body starts running low, recovery becomes painfully slow. That's why experienced survivors avoid working during peak heat whenever possible. Midday sun on an exposed island can drain water from your body terrifyingly fast. Even simple tasks start feeling heavier, and bad decisions become way more likely once exhaustion joins the conversation. The smarter strategy is working early in the morning and later in the afternoon when temperatures are lower. During peak heat, stay in shade, repair gear, organize supplies, maintain the fire, or simply rest. And psychologically, resting is harder than people expect, because doing nothing feels wrong when you're stranded. Your brain keeps saying you should be doing more. Meanwhile, your body is trying to prevent system failure. Survival becomes this constant balancing act between action and conservation. Push too hard and you burn yourself out. Move too little and problems pile up around you. The people who survive longest usually aren't the strongest. They're the ones who learn how to manage themselves efficiently, which honestly sounds boring until your survival depends on it. In normal life, a small cut is annoying. On a deserted island, a small cut becomes a countdown timer. Heat, humidity, saltwater, dirt, insects, tropical environments are basically a luxury resort for bacteria. Even a scrape from coral or a sharp branch can become infected surprisingly fast if ignored. And coral cuts are especially nasty. They don't just cut skin cleanly. tiny fragments often stay inside the wound, which means irritation and infection can keep getting worse long after the injury itself. So the moment you get hurt, you deal with it immediately. Clean the wound using boiled water once it cools down. Cover it with the cleanest material you have available. Then keep checking it daily for swelling, redness, or spreading discoloration. Because once infection spreads seriously, your situation changes fast. Fever, weakness, dehydration. Suddenly, your body starts fighting a second battle internally while you're still trying to survive externally, which is an absolutely terrible two-front war. Sun exposure matters too. Spending entire days under tropical sunlight without protection slowly destroys your energy levels. Sunburn isn't just painful. Severe burns actively dehydrate you and make sleep miserable. Aloe vera helps if you can find it naturally growing nearby. It's not magical medicine, but at that point, even mild relief feels like technological progress. And while physical injuries are dangerous, the mental side of survival is where things become genuinely frightening. Most people imagine survival as a physical challenge, but isolation does strange things to the human brain surprisingly quickly. The silence starts feeling heavy. Time gets blurry. Tiny problems suddenly feel enormous because there's nobody else around to interrupt your thoughts. And once panic fully takes over, people begin making decisions they would normally recognize as insane. That's why routine matters so much. Not because routine feels comforting, because routine protects your brain from spiraling. Every day should have structure. Check water, maintain fire, scan the shoreline, repair shelter, look for rescue opportunities. Purpose keeps the mind stable. Without purpose, hours start blending together. Motivation drops, hope gets weaker, and once someone emotionally gives up, their survival odds collapse hard, even if they're still physically capable of continuing. Which sounds dramatic until you read real survival stories. A lot of survivors also talk to themselves out loud. And honestly, that makes perfect sense. Humans are social creatures. Our brains are designed around interaction. So when isolation removes all conversation completely, speaking out loud can help maintain focus and emotional control. Besides, after enough days alone, even hearing your own voice starts feeling weirdly reassuring, and eventually another difficult reality appears. At some point, survival requires risk. People often imagine survival as playing it safe forever. But sometimes staying alive means making dangerous decisions carefully. Maybe you spot a distant boat offshore. Maybe your water source dries up. Maybe the only chance of rescue requires crossing rough terrain you've been avoiding. At some point, you may have to gamble. The important thing is understanding the difference between a calculated risk and desperation. Desperation feels urgent. Calculated risk feels uncomfortable. Those are not the same thing. Strong survivors learn to pause before acting, just long enough to think through consequences instead of reacting emotionally. Because exhaustion, panic, and hunger are all terrible decision makers pretending to be helpful. And honestly, that might be the biggest survival lesson of all. Not fire, not shelter, not food. The ability to stay calm long enough to think clearly while everything around you keeps getting worse. Because in survival situations, the people who last the longest usually are not superheroes. They're the people who manage to stay mentally functional slightly longer than everyone else. And that tiny difference changes everything.